But unfortunately, it'll never happen.
Front! Punches! He punches! And it's over!
I think it's going to be over.
Aguero in big trouble against the ropes!
I have to say there seems an element of genuine hate between these two, Ambrose.
For sure. I don't hate the man.
Just imagine if you bought a ticket. Stop it, Greg. You can stop it any time. Castillo's in trouble. Weak steps in, and the fight is over.
Fight fans, we've got another great episode for you here. Legendary Nights Season 2, Episode 2. And it's all about Evander Holyfield and Iron Mike Tyson. We're going to be covering their two epic legendary nights. Two great nights, two infamous nights of boxing from the mid to late 1990s. It's one that's been voted for by everybody that was on Twitter that took part in the poll of controversial fights. The bite fight, of course, came up, but after the poll was done, we decided, you know what, we're going to cover both of these fights. Both of these fights in their own right are legendary nights because they were infamous. They're infamous. They created such a shift in the pattern of heavyweight boxing at the time that the stories surrounding them all, the before, the middle and after, are just unbelievable. And I'm really glad that we get to tell the tale.
Same here. I've been waiting for this one to crop up for a little while, and I'm excited to finally be able to do Evander Holyfield and Iron Mike Tyson. It's a fight that in the early 1990s, it seemed like it was going to happen, and then it didn't, which we're going to go into. And then eventually they did finally share a ring, and you had that second fight, that infamous bite fight, which we're going to go into. So it's just a great one to get involved in. And second episode of our new season as well, after Joshua Klitschko. Two bangers to kick off this season.
Now, rather than going into the full careers of Holyfield and Tyson, what we've decided to do is pick it up from around about 1990 onwards and intertwine their careers as we've started doing for the series. And these two guys, you know, if you didn't know it already, they've actually got a really storied and long history. They go all the way back to the Junior Olympics, to be exact. Tyson actually recalls, in his own words, what that was like, and he said, "We were always friendly with each other. He was always on my side, rooting for me while I was fighting, and vice versa. He got a lot of bad breaks in the amateurs. He lost some fights that he should have won, and then they screwed him big time in the Olympics. When we were younger, we never thought we'd ever fight."
Yeah, so it's interesting to know that these two obviously were competing to be in the 84 Olympics. Mike Tyson missed out and Holyfield got in, and as he rightly said, he got screwed in the Olympics, and unfortunate for him. But again, you know, if you want to know about that sort of stuff, we did do Evander Holyfield and Riddick Bowe, and we mentioned that in that episode, so go and have a look at that. But we're going to jump to Mike Tyson. And Mike Tyson at the time, he was the unified heavyweight champion and was obligated to fight the number one contender at the time for the three governing organisations or the governing bodies within a year. And that was, of course, Evander Holyfield. So you had Tyson, who was the unified heavyweight champion, and Evander Holyfield, who was now the number one contender. And Holyfield explains that since I was the contender in two of those, the WBA and the WBC, he had to fight me, and he'd be stripped of those titles. Any hopes that King had that I might lose my number one rank as the deadlines approached soon evaporated, and he had no choice. So on June 18, 1990, we would see the brawl for it all, they called it. It was supposed to be Atlantic City, New Jersey, or Atlantic City, Jersey, with Tyson guaranteed $22 million and the largest guarantee ever for a boxer at the time, and Holyfield $11 million. Now, this was how it was set. It was these two were due to fight each other, but first they just had to get past a couple of fights before they eventually shared that ring.
What's interesting about that point is that there is actually a fight poster out there, an official fight poster for this fight in particular that never happened. It's quite rare, but if you do go into Google and search for it, you will find that there is a fight poster there. I think you can pick replicas up on eBay and places like that, but yeah, as Johnston rightly said, there you can actually go on and find information about this particular fight that was supposed to happen. Now, Evander Holyfield did his part. He stopped Seamus McDonough, who was 19-1-1 in the 4th round on June the 1st, 1990, at the Convention Hall in Atlantic City. His career record stood at 24 wins and 20 knockouts. He was the former unified Cruiserweight World Champion and was making the 3rd defence of his WBC Continental Americas heavyweight title. Now, with Holyfield sitting ringside on February the 11th, 1990, the then undefeated Mike Tyson, who was 37-0 with 33 knockouts, he lost his unified heavyweight titles by that 10th round knockout to Buster Douglas in Tokyo, Japan. We're not going to go too much into that particular fight because we have covered this already on Legendary Nights on Series 1. So please, if you want to go back and listen to that, and then maybe listen to this, do that. But go and listen to the tale of Tyson versus Douglas. All the information for that fight is on there. Now, with all 3 organisations agreeing that the World Heavyweight Champion would face the #1 contender, Holyfield, in June, Tyson's chances of a rematch were curtained. Douglas won a lawsuit that broke his promotional contract with Don King for breaching their contract when he tried to have Douglas's win against Tyson overturned. Now, an out-of-court settlement gave King the right to promote a Douglas-Tyson rematch, but Douglas first had to defend against Holyfield at the Mirage, a promotion in which King had no direct financial gain. Now, Steve Wynn, the owner of the Mirage, cut out the middleman and promoted the fight himself. Fighters see the wisdom of not needing to pay someone like Arum $3 million when they can talk to me themselves. If we have a hot fight, people will buy it on pay-per-view. No hyping by an Arum or a King will change that.
Yeah, so Steve Wynn jumped on that promotion and he took out the promoters, the 2 big promoters around at the time, Don King and Bob Arum. Now, Tyson, going back to Tyson, he returned to the ring first out of the 2 after the defeat to Buster Douglas with a 1st round knockout win over Henry Tillman, who was actually a 20-4 guy on June 16, 1990 at Caesars Palace in Las Vegas. Now, Tyson spoke of this fight with Tillman in his book, and he said, "I was fighting the guy who beat me in the amateurs. It was a great comeback story. The guy goes down and I'd get revamped. Even though he was an Olympic gold medalist and had a respectable 20-4 record, the odds were 1-2 for a 1st round knockout. I obliged the odd makers. I slowed him up with a huge right to the body and then finally caught him with an overhand right to his temple with 24 seconds left in the round. He was out on his back. I really didn't want to hurt Henry. I wanted to get it over with real quick. I liked him a lot, and I was just glad he got a nice payday. And by all sounds of things, they were good friends. Although he'd done him in the Olympics, he did have a lot of respect for Henry Tillman. 4 months later, on October 25th, 1990, Holyfield became the unified heavyweight champion when he knocked out an overweight Buster Douglas. Now, believe it or not, Holyfield actually went into this fight as the underdog. And he wrote in his autobiography that an awful lot of money changed hands in Vegas when I knocked Douglas out with 1 punch in the 3rd round. And Holyfield, well, he was finally a heavyweight champion, coming away from cruiserweight, winning a few fights at heavyweight, and then finally, obviously, not getting a chance to fight Tyson, but then ended up beating Buster Douglas and got all the marbles. So great performance there from Holyfield.
Evander, I guess this does mean you're a heavyweight, huh?
Well, first of all, I'd like to thank Christ for the victory. Thank Christ for to have patience and be able to go in and be able to capitalize on the opportunity, because he do said, being patient, you will be awarded.
Well, you were patient and you were awarded. You told us that you're a thinking man's fighter, and you proved it tonight. You boxed well for 2 rounds, and then you took advantage of what was a big mistake of his.
Well, yes, I did. I went out there, and I anticipated him pumping the jab, and I was out there to prove that I did have a better jab. I could hit him with the jab I wanted to, and he felt that I would be reckless, and I just took my time, did what my corner asked me to do, and of course, like George said, he throws that uppercut, which a lot of times you have to be perfectly still, and I was waiting, and he threw it in the wrong position. I was able to capitalize on it.
Evander, you're now heavyweight champion of the world. Undisputed, as Lou Duva so aptly points out. What's next for you?
Well, actually, I just thank God that I got through that, and I'm just going to go back and enjoy it and take what the Lord has given me and be able to go out and witness to the kids that, to have that positive attitude, because a lot of people felt that I couldn't do it because I was a small man. So with this would, display to the kids that, if you work hard, train hard, and work at anything, you can be successful.
Now, after Holyfield defeated Douglas and became the unified heavyweight champion, he decided to actually face George Foreman, who was on his comeback trail, instead of Mike Tyson, who, of course, was livid. The next night after his win, Holyfield announced that he would defend his title against George Foreman. That pissed me off. Everybody wanted to put me down, overshadow me, but they couldn't. I was still the biggest star in the boxing world, bigger than any of them, even without a belt. Now, Holyfield said in his autobiography that he wanted to fight Mike Tyson, but boxing politics prevented the fight from happening. Lou Duva decided to set up a fight against Foreman, who wasn't the number one contender. Tyson was after knocking out Tillman, but it didn't matter because you don't have to fight the top contender in your first defence. Now, Holyfield's promoters thought that the fight would generate more money than the Tyson bout and offered Holyfield $20 million, the new biggest payday in boxing history at that time. Now, the gamble was for Holyfield to beat Foreman and then get a massive payday to fight Tyson a few months later.
Interesting that he basically admits that Tyson was there and he could have taken that Tyson fight, but decided to go for George Foreman, and obviously Tyson wanted it. So it was interesting that he made that decision. But you can sort of understand it. Those that are around him wanted, especially Lou Duva, they were the ones that were advising him. So on December the 8th, 1990, at the Convention Centre in Atlantic City, we moved back to Tyson, and he knocked out a guy called Alex Stewart, who was 26-1. And Tyson recalled after the fight, the fight itself was just literally a first round knockout, and it was just easy pickings for Tyson. But Tyson did say on the way back from the ring, and he said, on my way out of the ring, Jim Lampley, the play-by-play announcer for HBO, asked me a few questions. The last two fights I had, I actually refused to talk to Larry Merchant when the fights were over. I'd like to thank all my fans watching on HBO for supporting me for all these years. This is my last fight for HBO because I think they'd rather see Holyfield than me. So he's having a little pop at HBO, and that was his last fight on HBO, funny enough, against Alex Stewart. He literally demolished the poor guy, as I say, in a round.
Now with his fights being aired on Showtime, Tyson knocked out Donovan Razor Ruddock, who was 25-1-1 on March the 18th, 1991 in Las Vegas. Tyson and Ruddock went back and forth for most of the fight until referee Richard Steele controversially stopped the fight during the 7th round in favour of Tyson. Now, the decision infuriated the fans in attendance, sparking a post-fight brawl in the audience, and Richard Steele, of course, had to be escorted from the ring as a result of that.
Crazy. This is what you get with Tyson, isn't it? There will be other altercations with the audience involved, which you're going to. They weren't great. They weren't the best of friends, Tyson and Rudd. I remember in his book he was talking about them being on a flight and he was throwing stuff at him and he was sort of sitting in a couple of seats ahead of him. So Tyson was basically trying to bully Ruddock a little bit, and apparently Ruddock had an entourage that thought they were a bit big themselves. So obviously the wrong team to be starting with was Mike Tyson's team. And so Tyson he had fought 3 times. He had won all of them by knockout and was now ready to get back his titles. Holyfield, who still hadn't made a defence since the win against Buster Douglas, said that he badly wanted to go up against Mike. But it didn't make sense to do it in his very first defence. And Holyfield said, I was going to be paid a fortune for fighting Foreman, would probably beat him and would then still be able to fight Mike. But if I fought Mike first, that would be a tougher match. And if I lost and never got the shot at Foreman, I'd be out at 20 million quid or $20 million. So, I mean, again, we just briefly mentioned it earlier. This is Holyfield absolutely admitting the fact that he wasn't going to fight Mike Tyson. He chose Foreman first for the payday. I don't know. It's interesting because it would have been interesting to see how it would have panned out if they had a fought at this point. But it is what it is. It didn't happen.
I know, it's $20 million though. You can't turn down $20 million to fight George Foreman, who at this point is what? I think he was around about 40, wasn't he, at this point? 41, 42
Yep.
when he was fighting here. So why would you not want to fight a 42-year-old guy in your first defence? Yeah, I know it was George Foreman. He wasn't really consistent at that time in his comeback as well. He won a few, then he lost a few, and then he had his obviously big win a few years after this. But the thing is, at this point in time, you're getting $20 million to take that fight with Foreman, where you're probably going to be able to grind out a points decision over him, or you take the fight with Tyson, which is, like he said in his own words, a much tougher fight. So he made the right decision. Personally, he made the right decision. I wouldn't disagree with him. But you always have that nagging thought of, what if these two guys would have got it on at that time? How would it have gone down? Well, Don King, of course, as always, wasn't happy with that particular deal. So he, Mike, and the WBC filed a lawsuit against Team Holyfield to stop the Foreman fight from happening. King and his WBC cronies once again tried to protest the Douglas victory, but it was denied, even though the supposed long count fight had happened months ago. Now, the aim was to use a ridiculous WBC rule that gave the council the power to order an immediate rematch if there was a controversial or irregular result. The WBC also had the power to order a rematch after an intervening bout. Now, Holyfield explains this ludicrous appeal, and he said in his own words, if the winner of the controversial bout, i.e. Douglas, gets beaten in the next match, which he did by me, then whoever beat him has to fight the guy he beat, as in Mike, before he fights anybody else. The bottom line, the WBC was ordering me to fight Mike before I fought Foreman, and the purpose of the lawsuit was to make me follow that order. The WBC basically just pushed the weight around in the courts, but were unsuccessful. So they tried to strip the title from Holyfield, but an injunction was agreed which stopped the WBC from doing that until the judge suspended the case until after the George Foreman fight.
Wow. What a craziness for Holyfield and his team at the time, and obviously Don King, his usual antics and just using his swing with the WBC to try and to basically force the fight, always for his own gain. We know that with Don King, and if he didn't, that is exactly what he was trying to do. It didn't work, so on April 19th, 1991, Holyfield outpointed the 42-year-old George Foreman, who was 69-2, in a fight that was actually billed as the Battle of the Ages. Now, the fight marked the launching of TVKO. You can see all these on YouTube, by the way, which is now called, obviously, HBO pay-per-view. Holyfield was guaranteed $20 million, as we've said, and Foreman got $12.5 million. Now, during the one-sided points victory, which was never plain sailing for Holyfield, when he's actually stunned a few times in the fight, he did stun Foreman as well. And someone actually, interestingly, set off a smoke bomb in the crowd during the third round, which forced many of the spectators in the expensive seats, I believe it was $1,000 a seat they were paying for, to vacate for a couple of rounds. So and that's something I didn't know. Yeah, interesting again, launching the TVKO, which is the beginning of the HBO pay-per-view network. And obviously Holyfield does get the win. He did grind out that win against Foreman, but as I say, it weren't plain sailing at all. It is a good fight. You can look at it again, all on YouTube. All this stuff's there. You can watch basically the whole fights and the build up towards it. I'd advise go and have a look at it. It's a good fight.
Now, back to Tyson's career, and due to the controversial decision in the first fight, Tyson and Razor Ruddock fought again in a rematch on June the 28th, 1991, once again in Vegas, but this time the fight went the distance, with Tyson taking a unanimous decision. With the boxing public now crying out for a Tyson-Holyfield fight, Don King continued his trash-talking of Holyfield during his reign as the champion, calling him an Uncle Tom several times to the media, and even referred to a decision that Holyfield made as bearing the wounds and scars of slavery. Typical Don King, of course. Then during an ABC satellite link between King, Tyson, Holyfield and his manager Ken Sanders, King told Holyfield that he had always had white people helping him and working for him, and what kind of proud black man does that? Holyfield actually rose above that, and he refused to get into this ridiculous argument and just allowed King to continue on one of his usual rants. But he did come back at King with this response in his autobiography. White people had helped me all my life, starting with Carter Morgan and the businessman who supported the boys club. I decide what people to deal with based on their skills and integrity. with never a thought to the colour or ethnicity or what God they believe in, or if they believe at all. I've had a white coach, black trainers, Muslim promoters, a Jewish manager, and a Mormon real estate consultant, and I wasn't going to let Don King use racial politics as an excuse to not let me fight Mike Tyson.
Great response from Evander Holyfield there, just showing you that, it doesn't have to work with an all-black team. And that was basically what King was getting at. But the thing is with it, the idea that I'm getting and the feel for it was that Don King wanted Evander Holyfield. He wanted him on his team. He didn't want him to be an opponent, or he wanted him to be an opponent of Tyson's, and he wanted the fight to be promoted by him and he have both fighters. That's what he wanted. So this is just ways of trying to get Holyfield to turn his back on the team he currently had. But then back to that ABC conference, that satellite conference that was aired, and Ken actually became tired of King's constant disregard to his man, Holyfield. And that basically, he became a bit hot-headed, and he interrupted King while he was on one of those rants. And he said, "Fine, winners take all." King was stunned and actually left speechless. This was Holyfield that said this. "You heard me. Tyson versus Holyfield, winner takes all." Holyfield, who was also shocked, actually remembered after the show. This is what he said after the show. I grabbed Ken and I said, "Why'd you do that?" He shrugged and replied, "Well, you can beat him, can't you?" And I said, "Well, yeah, I can beat him, but I wasn't prepared to I wasn't prepared to bet $15 million or $20 million on a winner-take-all arrangement." Ken let me fidget for a few seconds, and then he laughed, threw his arm across my shoulders and said, "Don't worry about it. There's no way Don King takes a chance like that. He'll work things out so the loser still makes a ton of money. Believe me." And well, eventually a proper agreement was crafted for Holyfield versus Mike Tyson to take place on November 8th, 1991, with the payout exceeding the biggest ever in boxing history. Once again, this is the third time we're saying that. For $30 million for Evander Holyfield, $15 million for Mike Tyson, with the two splitting the gate profits 60-40.
I'm just basically happy this moment's here. I'm prepared. I know the champion's prepared. This is a high moment of my life. This is dedicated to a great number of people who I missed, who's not with us no more. And I just like to thank the people who supported me after Tokyo to this moment right here. And I won't let you down. Evander's a very good fighter, extraordinary good fighter. He was a brilliant teacher, but it's just, I'm the best fighter. And I guarantee you, November 8th, I have the championship back on my waist.
First of all, I'd like to say I'm honored to be here. I thank God for this day. I thank TVKO for this day. I can thank everybody who put this fight together. I thank Tyson for this day. I have a lot of respect for Mike Tyson because he is one of the best fighters. My goal in life is to be my best. Only way I can feel that I'm my best when I fought the best people. Mike Tyson is one of the best, and I'm looking forward to fighting him. I'm the undisputed heavyweight champion of the world now. Come November 8th, I still would be the undisputed heavyweight champion of the world.
Now, following a disagreement with Team Foreman about a potential rematch against Holyfield, which was finally ironed out, there were no more obstacles to overcome and Tyson Holyfield was on. Then, on September 9th, 1991, the planned biggest fight in history took an almighty blow when Tyson was indicted on a charge of rape. With the pending court case due to be heard in February of 1992 and the proposed date of the fight set for November, it looked like it'd still go ahead. And Tyson, in his own word, explains what happens next. From September until the start of the trial, I ate a lot. I was nervous. I was training to fight Holyfield, but my heart wasn't into fighting. A few weeks into training, I tore a cartilage in my ribs. The doctors recommended that I postpone the fight. I actually could have fought, but I was happy to postpone it. I had too much on my mind.
Well, again, it just seemed like it was never meant to be for these two to ever share a ring. And Holyfield was actually notified of Tyson's injury on his birthday, October 19th, and the bout would have been postponed until March, April, meaning, of course, that everything relied on that verdict at the trial, which was due in February. Now, Holyfield obviously couldn't wait around for Tyson, so on November 23rd, 1991, he stopped Bert Cooper, 26-7, who was a substitute for a substitute. Then the rescheduled opponent was actually supposed to be Francesco Bermani, but he pulled out basically due to an injury. I believe it was a calf injury or something like that. And that was the fight where Holyfield suffered his first knockdown against Bert Cooper. Cooper actually hurt Holyfield with a right to the chin in the third round and followed up with a barrage of punches that sent Holyfield reeling to the ropes. The referee ruled that the ropes had kept Holyfield up, so gave him the count. Now, not that any of that mattered, as referee Mills Lane stopped the fight with 2 seconds left in the 7th round after Holyfield battered Cooper with 24 unanswered punches. And that is a great stoppage, by the way. Again, if you haven't seen that, go and take that. It's a fantastic finish from Holyfield, and Mills Lane absolutely right to stop that fight.
Now, the Tyson-Holyfield fight eventually was cancelled indefinitely when Mike Tyson was sentenced to prison for rape. Despite being 25 years old at the time of his conviction, Tyson was assigned to the Indiana Youth Center, now the Plainfield Correctional Facility, in April of 1992. Tyson said that, "If I would have fought Holyfield in 1991 when I was supposed to fight him originally, I would have knocked him out. He knows that everybody in his camp knows it. The best thing that ever happened to him was that I went to prison. That's when I lost all my timing. I couldn't be the tough 8-round fighter I had been."
And when you heard that he'd be serving time, what was your reaction?
Well, it's something that wasn't in my hand. I felt that, I guess for as a public, it was something that I felt that the public wanted to see. And it's sad that the public won't get a chance to see the two best men in this era. And so, I feel that the public lost out. I don't feel that I'm in anyone's shadow. I feel that, boxing is not Mike Tyson. Boxing is not Evander Holyfield, because when I'm gone, boxing still be here, and it was here before me and be here afterwards. So, and that's the way I look at it.
During Tyson's prison years, Holyfield fought 5 times, winning 3. Once against Larry Holmes, another against Alex Stewart, and another against Riddick Bowe, and losing twice to Riddick Bowe and Michael Moorer. Now, if you're interested in, obviously, the Bowe-Holyfield fights beforehand, those first 2, again, I refer you to that legendary night, which done on episode 1, Holyfield-Bowe, and we also go into some detail about those other fights there as well. So if you want to listen back on a bit more information on those fights in particular, then, go back and listen to that. It's, again, another good listen.
Now, we do pick up both careers now from the moment Mike Tyson is released from prison on March the 25th, 1995, after serving less than 3 years of his sentence. 2 months later, on May the 20th, 1995, Holyfield returned to the ring himself, following a brief retirement from the ring after he had lost his WBA and IBF heavyweight titles to Michael Moorer. His year absence was due to a misdiagnosis of an irregular heart. But his return was a winning one against Ray Mercer by a majority decision in Atlantic City. Now, in the summer of 1995, Tyson made his eagerly anticipated return to the ring against the Hurricane Peter McNeely, who was 36-1 in a fight that lasted only 89 seconds, with Tyson earning an easy victory via disqualification. The reason being, McNeely's manager entered the ring to prevent his man from taking any more damage, resulting in Mills Lane having to stop the fight. Although short, the fight itself was an absolute financial success, grossing a ridiculous $96 million worldwide, including a then record of $60 million in pay-per-view buys, with the fight being purchased by 1.52 million Americans.
Wow. Incredible. It was, everyone wanted him to come back. I believe he came out as a Muslim, didn't he, as well? Or he went in as a Muslim but didn't disclose that, and then he told everyone when he come out. I mean, I remember thinking that as well. I couldn't wait for Tyson to come back, and yeah, I'm not surprised he did manage to rack up them numbers just to see Mike Tyson back in the ring again. And we'll move back to Holyfield on that November 4, 1995, and Holyfield fought Bowe in that rubber match, that infamous rubber match. Again, we went into this information. We're not going to give you too much away. Go and have a listen to it. If you don't know the ins and outs of that fight, it's a good listen. Go and have a listen. So on December 16, 1995 in Philadelphia, Tyson knocked out the undefeated Buster Mathis Jr. 20-0 in a third round before getting a shot at the WBC heavyweight title on March 16, 1996, against our very own Frank Bruno, who was 40-4 in Vegas. Now, Sports Illustrated's Richard Hoffa describes the action, and he says he staggered Bruno early in the first round and cut his left eyelid towards the end of that round. He staggered him again in the second, and in the third, Tyson unleashed a 13-punch sequence that started with a right hand to Bruno's body and ended with a left hook that sent Bruno crashing to the ropes, where referee, once again, Mills Lane, comes up a lot in the Tyson Holyfield fights. He intervened and he stopped the fight. And again, I mean, we were all probably, I know I was, Sean, I was rooting for Bruno, hoping he could do the business. I think it was his first defence, wasn't it, as well, that WBC title, but it wasn't to be. Tyson won a heavyweight title for the second time. He went on to I think he become, I can't remember what number he was now. I think he was like the 5th or 6th to ever do that, to lose a title and then regain it. A great win for Tyson, let's be honest.
It was a great win for him, but it just goes to show you how much pulling power, again, he had at the time. You talked about the Peter McNeely fight a little bit earlier, the amount of money that was made off that fight, and then for him to go and win the title of poor Frank Bruno, he really did look like a rabbit in the headlights, didn't he? He didn't look great in that fight, to be honest with you. He had his crowning moment when he beat Oliver McCall to win it in 95, but having to do that first defence, he knew he was at the end of his career. If you read Frank Bruno's book, you knew he was at the end of his career when he took this fight with Tyson anyway, so it was Frank Bruno cashing out, basically. But for Tyson now, he's the WBC heavyweight champion of the world. And on May 10th, 1996, Holyfield forced Bobby Sue, who was 44-6, in retiring in the 5th round after he complained of a foreign substance in his eyes. Holyfield countered by saying, "I didn't have nothing on my glove to put on his eyes, but they're his eyes, and whatever happened, happened." Don Turner, Holyfield's trainer, added that he used Vaseline, that's all. Why would I do something like that? Tyson watched this fight and others with interest and said Holyfield hadn't looked very good in fights leading up to ours. He lost a couple of them, but at least he was active. I watched him fight Bobby, a puffed up light heavyweight, and he got the shit beaten out of him.
Yeah, so Tyson, obviously, he's looking at Holyfield and obviously feeling that he's got Holyfield's number. Holyfield at this point, he's not on the decline, no way, but that was what a lot of people were saying. A lot of people felt like he was washed up. That's what a lot of people told Tyson. So Tyson was feeling pretty confident. You know, their fight was clearly going to happen. It was in the horizon, and it was coming up very soon. And Lennox Lewis jumped into the pitch. Now, he actually turned down $13.5 million guaranteed to fight Tyson for the WBC title that he had won from Frank Bruno, and instead he accepted $4 million from Don King as step-aside money, and allowed Tyson to fight Bruce Seldon, who was 33-3, for an expected $30 million instead, with the intention that if Tyson defeated Seldon, that he would fight Lewis next. Now, Tyson added the WBA belt by defeating the champion at the time, who was Seldon, in the first round on September 7, 1996. Now, Seldon was actually severely criticised and mocked by the press for surrendering his title without much of a fuss. Tyson then had to relinquish that WBC belt. So he had the WBA, WBC. Straight after the Seldon fight, he's having to relinquish the WBC belt following his victory because he wasn't interested in facing their mandatory challenger at the time, who was, of course, Lennox Lewis. Instead, he opted for the big fight, the big money fight. He was hoping it'd be a unified fight, but it wasn't. But it was against Evander Holyfield, finally.
Once Holyfield passed a series of tests carried out by a doctor from the Mayo Clinic at the request of the Nevada Athletic Commission, he was declared fit to fight Tyson. The next hurdle was negotiating with Don King, who left it to the wire before declaring, "If your guy beats my guy, he has to come to fight for me, at least as long as he stays the champ." To get the deal completed, Holyfield, of course, agreed. Now, Tyson admitted that he didn't feel ready for Holyfield, saying, "I told everybody that I wasn't ready to fight major league fights, but Don was pushing me and I wanted the money. I was being greedy, so I took the fight." With his heart no longer into boxing but in need of the money, he said, "There was no fun in getting into the ring for me anymore. Once I left prison, the fun really died. That's why I had a guy like Steve Crocodile Fitch around me then. He was a good guy and he always motivated me, got me psyched to fight. He was also a training nut and I needed somebody like that pushing me then. Even with that motivator close by, Tyson still admits to not really training all that much for the first fight with Holyfield. I looked at some of his fights, but I didn't really have any particular strategy going into my fights at that time. Usually, it was just go in and hit them. And of course, it was Crocodile, aka Croc, that told Tyson that Holyfield had been training in the mountains for 17 weeks like a dog. But Croc also said that he heard from reliable sources that he wasn't even in shape, telling Tyson, Mike, you're going to kill this guy. Playing psychological mind games with Tyson, basically playing these games to get Tyson into the frame of mind, even though he wasn't training the way he used to train, but still giving him that belief, really, instilling this belief in Tyson that he would actually go and do a number on Holyfield.
Yeah, and he also had Don King saying that Holyfield was over the hill as well. So he was getting these mixed messages. So, obviously he's listening to Croc, and Croc wasn't the only one who believed that it would be an easy night's work for Tyson. So did basically plenty of the media. Now, a week before the fight, which was actually dubbed finally, Vegas was in a frenzy with fans and media all hyped for the main event. Holyfield recalled how much of an underdog he was going into this fight. And he really was. It's hard to believe now when you look back on Holyfield's career and anyone that wasn't around at the time. I don't think anyone would think Holyfield would be an underdog today. It was just how it was. Tyson was this, even though he'd lost to Douglas, he was still a big draw and a dangerous opponent. So going into the fight, this is Holyfield himself saying it. So the big running joke among reporters greeting each other was, "Are you here for the funeral too?" Meaning they'd come to see me get killed. Newsweek ran a headline, "Nice man, nasty business." With Evander Holyfield's best qualities, courage and faith, getting beaten to a pulp by Mike Tyson. The conclusion the writer reached was that, yes, I would be beaten to a pulp. I asked the reporter, who I'd known for a while, if you're all so sure I'm going to lose, how come there's so many of you here? Because we figure you're going to go down in style. So that was basically how many pundits, and you can actually find some articles just before the fight of people predicting how it's going to go. And I'm telling you now, there was nobody I could find that had Holyfield winning this fight. In fact, every article I read and anything in both books, in Tyson's book, in Tyson's documentary, I think he mentions it, in Holyfield's book, you can look anywhere you want, any source you want. Evander Holyfield was such an underdog for this fight that actually people thought he was going to get knocked out in the first round, and there was big money being bet on it.
Evander, the real deal Holyfield, has fought in some of the greatest battles in the history of heavyweight boxing.
Oh, he's got him in a left hook!
5 years ago, he was due to meet Mike Tyson.
And Tyson is down!
Tyson lost his title. Holyfield lost his chance.
I'm not tested till I fight Mike Tyson.
Now live on Skybox Office, the pay-per-view event Judgment Night Part 2.
I want to prove to the world that I'm better than Tyson.
Finally, Mike Tyson faces Evander Holyfield.
It'll come down to the two best guys.
A world championship fight 5 years in the making.
You're going to see a great fight.
So now we're going to move into that first fight, and it happened on November the 9th, 1996. Mike Tyson and Evander Holyfield finally met in the ring at the MGM Grand in Las Vegas. The referee that called the action was Mitch Halpern, and the three judges were Dalby Shirley, Jerry Roth, and Federico Volmer. The promoter was Don King, the ring announcer was Jimmy Lennon Jr., and Tyson was making the first defence of his WBA heavyweight title, and as Johnston's rightly said there, he was the bookie's favourite. Now, we're going to take a segment once again from Richard Hoffer's article, who reported the following in the November 18th, 1996 issue of Sports Illustrated. Tyson and Holyfield met him in the centre of the ring at the opening bell and engaged in the kind of furious combat that no heavyweight fight fan had seen in years. They swung wildly and then collapsed into clinches, shoved each other away, and finally resumed battle as the cycle began again. It was breathtaking, especially when it became clear that Holyfield would not be flattened by Tyson. And Hoffer continued. In the second round, Holyfield, who is not known as a big puncher, hit Tyson with a left hand that seemed to stagger him. At the end of the round, Tyson paused on his way to the corner and looked at Holyfield as if he was puzzled. In fact, He was, as he admitted later. He blacked out. The fight went 8 more rounds until referee Mitch Halpern stopped it less than a minute into the 11th. But afterwards, Tyson couldn't actually recall none of them.
Holyfield with a barrage showing tremendous power. Tyson's legs are bad. The championship rounds, round 11. And now here we go.
Mike Tyson is a warrior too, and he's still gonna have that natural power. That's the last thing that'll go. Evander's got to be careful here to hold on, but he has fought a perfect fight.
No matter what happens from here on in, we are looking at a sports legend in the purple trunks, Evander Holyfield. Holyfield continues to dig in. A left hook to the head. He's got Tyson in trouble. Tyson's ready to go. A straight right hand. The Halpern stops the fight, and Holyfield has won.
I can't believe what I'm seeing. It's the most unbelievable thing I've ever been privileged to witness.
Yeah, so we're going to do something slightly different because obviously we've got the information from both fighters. So we're going to try and explain the fights as we see it, as other reporters put it, and then through Tyson and Holyfield's eyes. So here's Tyson's version, giving his version on the events. And he said, the fight started well enough. I landed a good body shot on him in the first round and he screamed. I was thinking that I was going to win. But from the second round on, I really blacked out. I didn't know what was happening at the time, but during the second round, I finally realised that he had been using his head to butt me senseless. In the 10th round, he connected with 23 punches, and I never felt a thing. I only heard the sound of them whooshing around my head. I was only staying up because of adrenaline. When I'd go back to my corner between rounds, I didn't hear a fucking thing my trainers were trying to tell me. I don't remember going into the ring or getting up to the fight. I just remember being there. So this was, again, from Tyson's book. He's basically saying that the reason why he was knocked senseless and he blacked out was because of a headbutt and not necessarily a punch.
Hey, Mike, can you give us your assessment of what happened there, Mike, in this fight?
All right. I really wasn't aware of what happened, but he fought a good fight.
Are you all right now, or are you still a little bit out of it?
I'm okay. My eye hurts a little bit, but I'm fine.
A lot of your corner here has been complaining about the headbutts. Were you headbutted by Evander Holyfield?
Well, he headbutted me, but I probably headbutt him too.
Did you take this fight a little bit lightly? Did you maybe overlook Evander Holyfield?
He's just a good fighter, and I take my hat off to him.
All of the bad blood that existed before, truly this was a fight of a lot of respect. Is that now gone, and would you look forward to a rematch?
I look forward to a rematch with anybody, yeah.
What do you make of that fight then, going back to it now and going back to our memories of that initial fight? I think a lot of us, I mean, me included, felt like Tyson was going to do that number on Holyfield, that Holyfield maybe was past his best. When you look at the fights with Bo and you think, oh, well, you know, he's had this bit of mixed bag of tricks over the past couple of years, and Tyson's kind of come out of there looking like a killer. But that's only because of the people they were lining up in front of him. Peter McNeely, Bruce Seldon, these guys weren't a patch on Evander Holyfield, so he was knocking these guys out, and he had this false sense of confidence from that, and the fact that he had this false sense of confidence from the people around him, basically whispering in his ear, saying, you're going to kill this guy. You're going to kill this guy. And when he got in there, and he couldn't hurt Evander Holyfield the way he thought he was going to hurt him, that's when he didn't know what to do. That's when everything seemed to all go wrong for me.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, at the time, because he had literally just done Bruno, my man, and I was a kid and I was like gutted. I thought, well, Tyson's back, and you know, he's just back to that formidable self, and I just assumed he would have Holyfield. I just thought he would beat him as well, and I do recall moments, you know, from my family, sort of saying Tyson's just going to destroy Holyfield, because that was how it was perceived by everybody around at the time. Obviously, we know better now. The fact that we're able to look at Holyfield's career and see that he was a fantastic heavyweight, not necessarily just a fantastic cruiserweight. So I'm with you. I thought it was going to just be one-way traffic. And then when you do see the fight and you see Tyson nailing him and Holyfield staying there, and then Tyson realising that his power is it's not happening, and Holyfield just kept coming forward, and he took over that fight. I think he bullied Tyson. I think that Holyfield proved to the world that, you know, he wasn't just a cruiserweight. And people called him a blown up cruiserweight as well, which was quite comical. I mean, he laughs about that in the book. People called him a blown up cruiserweight. He took that as a compliment. He's like, How can I be a blown-up cruiserweight just over 200 pounds, taking on the best heavyweights around and beating them? So he bullied him. I watched it again the other night, and that's the only thing I can think of. I was looking for the headbutt that Tyson's talking about, and yeah, there is. He does lean in with his head a little bit, but Tyson, he looks stunned, and I don't necessarily believe it's from the head. I think it's just from the volume of shots he had taken, and I make the referee right for calling an end to the fight. And credit to Holyfield, he deserved credit, and he still didn't get it.
Now, the Ring named Tyson versus Holyfield Fight of the Year and Upset of the Year for 1996, and Holyfield was named the 1996 Fighter of the Year by the Ring magazine and the Boxing Writers Association of America. So, by the end of the year, although not everybody was giving him the credit he deserved, he did actually walk away with them accolades. Now, with many of the pundits refusing to give Holyfield all the credit, much of the discussion revolved around what Tyson didn't do in preparation for the fight, or that Holyfield won due to an excessive use of his head. He didn't feel like he'd done anything wrong during the fight, Holyfield, and he believed that he won it fair and square. He was bewildered as to why he was still not being congratulated on his performance. Now, some theorised that Holyfield must have been juiced up on steroids, but those rumours were actually put to bed when he released the drug test results taken before the fight as negative. Holyfield said in his own words, "What did I have to do to get some respect? I was supposed to have died in that ring, and instead I won. I was heavyweight champ of the world and had beaten 3 former champions on the way to getting there. Everybody I thought was bigger than me, and I beat them 34 out of 36 times anyway." Holyfield became only the second fighter in heavyweight history to win the world championship for a third time, and the only other person, of course, was the great Muhammad Ali. He deserved more credit than he got, Evander Holyfield, for that win.
He really did, and I keep saying, I mean, it's just weird, isn't it? Going away from legendary nights very quickly, but we've seen it recently in the last couple of weeks with 2 fights with Dubois and Joyce and Lyndon Arthur. 2 guys that everyone's looking at what the other guys didn't do rather than what the other guys did do to get the win. And this is pretty much the same thing. Everyone was saying, well, Tyson should have absolutely annihilated Holyfield, and he didn't. Holyfield beat him, and there must be a reason behind it. And the reason is that Holyfield took steroids, or Tyson didn't train properly, or it's the excessive use of the heads. People were looking for excuses, and the only thing Holyfield could do now was to take the rematch, and that's basically what he did, and he had to beat him. So after that fight was over, Tyson actually recalled, this is what he said in his own words, that he was still so out of it that he actually asked his corner man which round it was he knocked Holyfield out in, which was interesting. So this was following that first fight, and Croc was actually enraged in the dressing room as well after actually saying that, "Look at your head, Mike," Tyson said. "I had 6 knots as big as my fist all over my head from Holyfield's headbutts. I wanted to fight Holyfield right away. I was so mad. I was really sore and beat up, but I started training the next night." So Tyson's wife, Monica, was pregnant at the time of his second child, and while being in a hard training camp and coming out of this Holyfield fight, he just wanted to get himself in the best shape he could possibly get into. There was rumours that also on the outside he was out with plenty of other women, and again in his book he does allude to this. The amount of times he had his wife Monica at home, pregnant, and he was out with all different sort of women. I think that all part of the team that was around Tyson, no matter how hard he trained, I still don't believe that mentally he was in the right frame of mind.
Now, originally, Holyfield had signed a contract that agreed to a $20 million flat fee for a rematch with Tyson, but there was a way of manipulating the contract without breaching it and getting more money out of Don King. Holyfield threatened to retire, which had no negative financial consequences if he did. It upset King, but they managed to thrash out a deal worth $34 million, which at the time was the largest amount of money paid for a single performance in any sport, anywhere in the world. And how good is it to actually hear about someone manipulating Don King for a change instead of him manipulating them?
Brilliant, isn't it? 20 million flat free. Apparently it was in the rematch clause. $20 million, that was it. But his manager at the time put in the extra line, if I retire, basically there's no financial consequences, as you rightly said. And obviously King's like, I want the rematch. He wants the rematch. He's going to earn more money than the first fight. he ends up getting an extra $14 million. Ah, brilliant. Music to my ears when I heard that.
Music to my ears as well. How many times have we discussed Don King in all the episodes? And if you've not heard our story of Don King on the darker side of boxing, please go and listen to that, because there's many stories about the manipulation that Don King did over the course of his career as a promoter. Now, Tyson began his preparations by making a change in camp, and he said, "My own roommate Jay Bright had been my trainer, but I replaced him with Richie Jayatete. Now, firing Jay was easy. He was family, and family is always the first to go. I trained twice as hard for that second fight, and 3 days before the fight, there was some controversy over the referee. Now, Mitch Halpern was supposed to ref the fight again, but Tyson was adamant that he'd been drunk as a skunk during the first Holyfield fight, and in his words he said, "As soon as I went out for the instructions and he went to touch my glove, I smelt it. His eyes were red. I'm an addict. I could tell right away. No referee would have let me take that kind of punishment that Holyfield was giving to me, but he let me take it all the way till the 11th round because he was so drunk and out of it." Now, Tyson's co-manager, John Horn, went before the commission and said that Halpern was too lenient in allowing Holyfield to hold me and butt me. The commission voted 4-1 to retain Halpern, but after the issue was raised, Halpern actually took himself away from the fight.
Yeah, it's a funny comment now. I didn't know that. I don't recall ever hearing that. So it was interesting to hear Tyson say that apparently he was he had a few too many. Yeah, at the end of the day, I'm sort of pleased that he took himself out of it. That no, Tyson Camp didn't want him in the ring. You know, you're a referee. I suppose you got to take yourself away from the equation, which is what he did. I think it was the right decision on his behalf. So Holyfield's camp, they requested that Joe Cortez and Richard Steele actually be excluded from the fight because they were the two referees that they thought might actually favour Tyson's style. So the commission agreed to use Mills Lane. He was actually a former district attorney and district judge who actually didn't like Tyson. He had been quoted extensively saying that he was a vicious criminal who shouldn't be allowed to box. So again, it's interesting they let him go in, but he was thrilled with the decision, obviously, Mills Lane, and he said, "I felt empathy for Mitch, but I'm ready for the fight." Tyson obviously wasn't happy, and he said, "How could I possibly get a fair shake when the ref was saying stuff like that against me?" What I didn't know at the time of the second Holyfield fight was that Lane and Holyfield had a close relationship. Holyfield's own trainer, Tommy Brooks, was quoted as saying that Mills Lane cried tears the night Holyfield lost to Riddick Bowe. Holyfield called the change of referee basically just another mind game, just like the demand of a drugs test in the first fight. Mike's camp had insisted on a change of refs at the last minute. They got no argument from me. Mills Lane in the ring meant one less thing for me to worry about.
I never knew that about Mills Lane either, that apparently he cried tears the night Holyfield lost to Riddick Bowe. Well, that's a bit biased, isn't it? If you say so,
Yeah.
from them quotes.
Isn't it?
It really is. Now, the original date for the second fight was set for May the 3rd, 1997, but Tyson actually got headbutted in sparring and the fight was postponed till June 28th at the MGM Grand in Las Vegas, with referee, of course, Mills Lane in charge of the action. Now, the three judges were Jerry Roth, Dwayne Ford and Chuck Jampa, and Jimmy Lennon Jr. once again was the ring announcer. This was Holyfield's first defence of the WBA heavyweight title, and the actual fight and the bill was titled The Sound and the Fury.
Strategy was always going to be the key when two fighters of such pedigree and such contrasting styles finally came to meet. And it was Holyfield who mastered the tactical battle last time. No fear. A solid chin. Holyfield stamped his authority. He became the aggressor. His jab controlled the fight, and his fast counterpunches did the damage.
I was throwing punches halfway, and he would beat me to the punch by extending his punch. And then come forward, the punch would be here, and he counted me. He was just through. Had real fast counter punches. His first class counter puncher, and it was awesome.
So where did Tyson go so horribly wrong? He threw single shots. No quick combinations, no head movement. He stood square on, wide open to those counters. There was no effectiveness from Tyson's jab. The knockout didn't come, and he had no plan B. When the corner was needed, they too had no answer.
I really thought I was just going over there and just obliterate him quickly, and I have no game plan.
Will he have one for the rematch? Richard Giacchetti is back. Can he reorganize Tyson again?
There's going to be motivation. There's going to be somebody be able to tell him what to do and give him the right instructions and help him do the fight.
But how much does Tyson himself want this? Was the postponement legitimate? Can he bring back those quick combinations that made him devastating? And if so, will Holyfield be able to cope? At 34, can he rise to the heights again? And will he put on such a skillful show?
When you weigh everything up, Holyfield is the better technician, the better fighter.
Tyson must prove himself this time. It could go early, it could go late, it could go either way. Tactically, it's the perfect clash.
You got one guy who's a big puncher, and you got one guy that's, a skilled boxer.
So we're moving to the fight, the bite fight, as they call it. And here's how all saw the action, as in all of us that was watching at home, up until the clash of heads, basically. Now, Tyson was rocked in the first round by a right. In the second round, Tyson threw a right as Holyfield was starting to throw a left hook. As Tyson leaned into the punch and Holyfield ducked it, their heads came together and opened a cut over Tyson's right eye. Now, Mills Lane called time and informed ringside officials that the cut was caused by a headbutt. Now, those first two rounds for me, I felt that Evander Holyfield bossed them both. I know Tyson did come out a lot more aggressive. Once again, he did that in the first fight, but I thought Holyfield held his own, and I felt that he had the better of Tyson in rounds 1 and 2. And then obviously that clash of heads. And when I watched it last night, I still can't see it, for me, being that Holyfield has deliberately headbutted him. I honestly feel that it was just an accident. And as I pulled this bit of information from the internet, and it was exactly precisely that way. It was a left hook from Holyfield and a right from Tyson, and they just hit heads. I mean, I don't think there was anything more in it. It was just a collision of heads. I don't know how you see it. Did it look like a headbutt to you, Sean?
It looked like momentum. It looked like the momentum of the punches being thrown is what caused it. That's the only way I've ever saw it. I've never saw it as Holyfield intentionally headbutting him in this particular fight. If you'd spoke to me about the first one, then yeah, absolutely. It did look like he was using his head way too much, but this just looked like basically them using each other's momentum, and that's what caused it. That's what caused it to me, the cut over the eye. So straight away, adversity is right against Tyson. He's got a cut eye. He's been hurt already very early on in the fight, and now this is Tyson's account of the fight, and he said in his own words, "The fight started and I was feeling pretty good. I was confident, my body felt good, and my movement was fluid. I was pretty elusive, moving around, not throwing anything big, just boxing. Then Holyfield, he butted me again. It got worse in the second round. I started throwing some punches at Holyfield, and he dove in again, and boom, a big gash opened up over my eye, and I immediately turned to Mills Lane. He butted me. Lane didn't even say anything, but he ruled it an accident." So Holyfield's account was obviously different, and he said Mike was quickly growing frustrated, and he started abandoning his fundamentals in an effort to just sock me. It didn't help when my head banged into his eye during a particular aggressive clinch. It wasn't a headbutt, just an inadvertent collision. But when it opened a cut over his eye, he started pointing to it and complaining to the ref. Mike had cut his eye in practice while sparring. That was the injury that had delayed this fight for 6 weeks. And what he had now wasn't a new cut from colliding with my skull. It was the old cut. It was reopened when my head was rubbed against his as he held me in the clinch. He needs to blame his sparring partner, not me.
Yeah, interesting, isn't it? Two completely different accounts of what happened there. I mean, obviously, Holyfield, he wouldn't admit if he deliberately did headbutt him. But, I mean, from what we've both said, I think we agree that although he does use excessive head movement or excessive use of the head, especially during that first fight, I don't think the intentions were there to headbutt him. And the fact that he does mention there that it was an old cut, maybe it hadn't healed properly. Who knows? It's an interesting one, isn't it? He's saying blame the sparring partner. Tyson obviously wasn't. Now, it was in the final minute of the third round where it all changed. And while the two were tied up, basically, Tyson bit a chunk out of Holyfield's right ear. Lane stopped the action and deducted 2 points from Tyson after a whole commotion as well, by the way, which we'll go into in a sec. But Lane checked the damage of Holyfield's ear and he could see that he had taken a bite out of it, his blood pissing out. He goes to the corner of Mike Tyson and he says he bit him. I'm going to take 2 points away. And then you hear Tyson say it was a punch. And then Lane reply, bullshit. It's clear as day. Yeah, it looked like he was going to get disqualified at that point. You clearly bit him. We're going to go into how Tyson felt and how Holyfield felt in a sec. It was just a bizarre moment.
Oh, a low blow by Holyfield with the left hook, and Mills Lane gives him an earful. Back comes Tyson on the belt. Tyson with a short left hook to the head of Holyfield. A right hand by Mike Tyson to the head of Holyfield. A straight right.
The left hook got his attention, then he came back with a nice 1-2, a left hook and a right hand, and Holyfield looked like he was stunned.
But what a chin by Holyfield.
Good stiff jab.
That's the jab Mike didn't have in the first fight.
What happened here?
He got bit, I think.
Evander Holyfield, look out, he's pushed right here. Above us by Tyson.
He's got bit in the ear.
Oh my goodness, he's got a bloody right ear. Holyfield bit by a dirty Mike Tyson.
Oh man, this story is just unbelievable. When we go into it and we discuss how this actually went down, one of the most infamous moments in the boxing ring, it's crazy what happened that night. I mean, I'll give my thoughts on it, but I really want you guys to listen to what both of these guys had to say about that particular incident. Now, Tyson wrote about what drove him to bit Holyfield's ear. In his own words, from his book, he said, "When the third round began, I was furious. I was so anxious to start fighting that I left the corner without my mouthpiece, but Richie called me back and he put it in. We started the round and I hit Holyfield with a couple of hard punches. The crowd started going crazy. They could feel that the fight had really shifted, and that's when he butted me again. I started feeling weary, like I was blacking out a little, but my anger and adrenaline jolted me back. I just wanted to kill him. I was furious. I was an undisciplined soldier, and I lost my composure, so I bit him in the ear. Now, people think that I spit my mouthpiece out to bite him, but I didn't. From that point on, I don't remember too much because I was so enraged. When I look at the tape, I must have spat the piece of his earlobe on the canvas because I was pointing to it. It was like, yeah, you take that." Now, Tyson continues. Holyfield leapt up into the air in pain, and then he turned to go to his corner, but I followed him and pushed him from behind. I wanted to kick him right in the groin, but I just pushed him. It was a street fight now. The doctor took a look at him and allowed him to continue, and the Mills Lane took 2 points away from me, but in my mind, it didn't matter.
Wow. I always wanted to know what the hell was going on in Tyson's head at that moment, and obviously the excessive butting, as he seemed to just keep mentioning, it tipped him over the edge, and he decided to take literally a chunk of his ear and spit it onto the mat. It's just one of the most craziest things I've ever seen. When you see it slowed down as well, you're just in shock of it. And the commentators do make me laugh as well when they're sort of saying, "I'd kick him." I think one of them was saying, "I'd have kicked him back." Really funny. But it wasn't for Holyfield. And this is Holyfield who actually recounted the moment of this first bite. And he said, "I didn't know right away what had happened. I spun away from Mike and jumped in the air, looking like a cat that had just stepped on the third rail. I was in agony as I danced around trying to deal with the pain. I noticed that there was blood streaming down my face and shoulders. What the heck had happened? Did I get shot by a sniper? I hadn't heard any guns being fired. He bit him," someone was shouting. "He bit him." I touched the glove on my ear, but it was like putting a blowtorch to it. I pulled my hand away quickly and blood flew from my glove. I had no idea yet, but Mike had actually bitten a part of my ear off. So Holyfield explaining the pain he was in there. He actually does go into a little bit more where he says it's the worst pain he's ever felt in a boxing ring, considering the amount of wars he was in. I suppose it's just the unexpected of it, but wow, what a mad moment. Just a moment of madness from Mike Tyson.
It was one of the most craziest moments in boxing history, and obviously when we put the poll out for this second episode, it was all about infamous moments, and obviously had, you know, Riddick Bowe and Andrew Gallotta, the fucking groin shots, and then you had Tyson biting the ear, and then there was just so many other infamous moments, but this one, for me personally, stands out a mile, head and shoulders above the rest, because of how it all went down. I remember this middle of the night in the UK, 4 or 5 in the morning, and you cannot believe what you're actually seeing. I think I was around about 11 or 12 at the time, and I was really just getting into boxing in general. And seeing this guy, this scary guy in Mike Tyson, literally biting into Holyfield's ear like it was a piece of meat, was just, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I'm just like, what is going on here? Why is this guy? This doesn't happen in boxing, surely. And then the fact that when they go back and actually pan to the floor, and they pan and zoom onto the floor, and you see a piece of Holyfield's ear on the floor, and you're like, what the actual fuck has just happened? Seriously, what has just happened here? I can't, honestly, Johnston, I can't get over it. It still, for me, remains probably the most infamous moment in boxing history in the ring.
Oh, absolutely. And just the fact that he bit it and spat it out, I mean, he even says himself he doesn't even remember spitting it out. He just remembers watching back on the tape and seeing himself pointing at it. He was in a rage, a fit of rage, and how they decided to continue the fight. I mean, you see all the commotion, and the commissioner comes in the ring, and the doctor's in the ring, and the doctor's asking Holyfield, are you okay? Can you continue? And Holyfield's saying, what, because of my ear? He's like, yeah, of course I can continue. I'm going to knock him out. That's what Holyfield was saying. And Tyson's just in a rage over in his corner, just wants to attack whoever comes near him. He just wants to rip Holyfield's head off. And then Mills Lane looks like he's going to disqualify him, actually decides, I'm going to take 2 points away. And he just explains it to Tyson. And then they continue. And the action's resumed. And Tyson was clearly animated. He was eager to get back underway. The points have been deducted. The doctor's cleared Holyfield to continue. And obviously Tyson's still in a rage. Then bites Holyfield's left ear just before the end of the round. And you see Holyfield jump in the air again, run back, and then think, actually, I'm going to keep going. And he runs back to Tyson to try to have it out with him, just continue fighting. You see Tyson saying, come on. So you're just like, this is mental. I can't believe what I'm seeing. And Mills Lane he basically, I think he would have seen it. I mean, there's only seconds left of that third round, but he sees the bite marks on Holyfield's other ear, and that's when he decides to disqualify Mike Tyson.
Now, Tyson said this in his book. The fight resumed and he butted me again, and the ref, of course, did nothing. So we clinched and I bit him again on the other ear. But we kept on fighting until the end of the round. Holyfield said, 13 seconds into the restart, we fell headlong into the twilight zone. Mike grabbed hold of me, pulled me in close, and clamped his teeth down on my other ear. The pain was blinding, but I was so shocked that he would do it again that it took about 2 seconds for it to actually sink in. I jumped away, but this time I wasn't going to hop around and take a chance on having the fight stopped. I was going to knock Tyson out right now. As I launched myself directly at him, he was standing there beckoning me with both hands, yelling, "Come on." Tyson at this point, as you rightly said, was uncontrollable. One of the commentators said it best when they said, Tyson is possessed. He was. Even Tyson said this on reflection sometime after the fight. Holyfield was in his corner. He didn't want any part of this shit, but I was still trying to get a hand on him. I wanted to destroy everything and everybody in his corner. People were pulling me and blocking me, and he was standing in his corner, huddled up. Everyone was protecting him. He looked frightened. I was still trying to get at him. I had 50 people on me, and I was still fighting the cops. Oh, Lord, they should have tasered me. I vote for being tasered that night.
That's brilliant. That's absolutely quality. If they'd have tasered him, that'd have been even better. I would have loved to have seen him get tasered as well. I mean, he was a man. He really was a man possessed. There was literally, I was watching it again today and just seeing how the police come in and he's pushing them away with his gloves, and it looks like he's going to whack a policeman. It looks like he's going to knock everyone out, and people are literally holding him back, and then he spins around. He doesn't know who it is. It's like he's going to attack him, and then they run away. It's bedlam. It's crazy. I'll vote for him being tasered myself. But Holyfield wrote about these moments after the fight as well, and he said, so down in my locker room, there were several dozen people in various states of panic, fear and outrage. The first thing I did was wave them all to silence and lead a quiet prayer. He was a religious man, in which I forgave Mike. I figured that if I could find it in my heart to do that, it might have a calming effect on the others, and it did. Then someone came in and held up a plastic bag. Got a piece of his ear in it, he said as he handed it to Tim Hallmark. Seems that Mike had spat it onto the canvas. Tim buried the bag in some ice, and then I was hustled upstairs to await an ambulance. The security people were clearing the stadium, and there was a surging mob now surrounded the hotel. There were numerous reports of shots being fired, but I didn't hear any while waiting for the ambulance to fill up and take me to the hospital to get my ears looked at. How you doing, Holy? Tim basically asked him before the doors closed of the ambulance, and he said he smiled at him and said, "Still champ, ain't I?"
That's kind of a really good way of Holyfield being able to rise above it. I mean, obviously I've watched interviews of Holyfield years afterwards talking about this moment, but to hear in his own words there what he was actually thinking in the immediate aftermath, just takes a real big man to do that, to be able to rise up against that type of action against him. It was great. I didn't realise he'd forgiven him so quickly. I'll be honest, I never knew. I thought it was years later that he'd forgiven him, but to forgive him at this point is just shows you the mark of a man that he really is.
He butted me in the first round, but then he butted me again in the second round. Then as soon as he butted me, I watched him. He had me holding, and he looked right at me, and I saw him, and he was going for it, and he kept going for it, and he butted me again. He kept going down and coming up, and he charged into me. And no one warned him, no one took any points for him. What am I to do? This is my career. I can't continue getting butted like that. I got children to raise, and this guy keeps butting me, trying to cut me and get me stopped on cut. I got to retaliate.
Now, immediately you stopped. You stopped fighting immediately right there, and you turned to Mills Lane, and you said what? And the result was he did nothing. But what did you say to Mills right at that time?
I don't remember what I said. I told him that he butted me, but I know I complained about being butted. And we complained about the first fight. Listen, Holyfield is not the tough warrior everyone says he is. He got little nicks on it there, and he quit. I got an eye. I got one eye. I got one eye. He's not impaired. He got ears. I got one eye. Big dick. If he take one, I got another one. I'm ready to fight. He didn't want to fight. I'm ready to fight him right now.
Mills Lane stopped the fight. It wasn't Holyfield who stopped.
Oh, he didn't want to fight. He didn't want to fight.
Let me ask.
We don't know what Mills did.
Don't put nothing on Mills. Well, Mills said he stopped the fight. You bit him. Was that a retaliation for the eye when you bit him in his ear?
Regardless of what I did, he butted me for 2 fights.
But you got to address it, Mike.
I did address it. I addressed it in the ring.
Why did you do that, though, Mike? I mean, was that the proper response?
Look at me. Look at me. Look at me. Look at me. I got to go home. My kids are going to be scared of me. Look at me, man.
Now, we go back to Tyson, and the drama didn't even end there for him. On the way back to the dressing room, someone tossed a full bottle of water at Tyson, and someone else gave him the middle finger, and he recalled, "I climbed over the railing and tried to get at them, but my cornerman pulled me back. Then, more people were throwing their sodas and beers on us. I was still going crazy in the dressing room. I had my gloves on and I was punching the walls." John Horn spoke to Jim Gray, the Showtime announcer, shortly after the fight and said, "All I know is that Mike got a cut over his eye 3 inches long and Evander got a little nip on his ear. That don't mean nothing. He jumped around like a little bitch. The headbutting was going on so long. Come on, one headbutt may be accidental. 15 is not."
Oh dear. I'm just going to carry on with Don King. And he was reported as saying, "I'm not making excuses for Mike, but I know him. I know that he's a good human being. He's my friend and I stand by him." What happened that night was an aberration, a sad episode that all of us wish could have been avoided. It has never happened to Mike before, and I believe it will never happen again. I sort of agree with Don to an extent. He used to do some crazy things like Iron Mike Tyson. Biting someone's ear off was definitely not one of them, or part of someone's ear. I have to completely disagree with John Horns, his co-manager at the time, sort of saying the headbutting is the equivalent of him biting someone's ear off. Again, it wasn't a constant headbutting. Not that I could see personally. It didn't seem like it to me. So, yeah, I think that was a ridiculous statement from John. I think he probably should have waited a little bit longer before making such a ridiculous statement.
A little nip of the ear. A little nip of the ear. He literally took a fucking chunk off his ear. A chunk of Holyfield's ear. And yet John Horn is saying that in the immediate aftermath. Oh, it was only a little nip. Come on, man. Bloody hell. He made some foolish comments there at that particular time. Now, when Tyson arrived home after the fight, there were angry protesters outside his gates. They were blowing the horns and screaming, "Fixed fight," and "Move out of the neighbourhood." Someone even threw a fish head into his property. Now, they kept it up until some of Tyson's security guys shot BBs in their direction. Once the doctor had stitched Tyson up, he began to feel a bit apologetic, and in his own words he said, "I shouldn't have done that. I was reluctantly regretful. I was an undisciplined soldier. My fans are going to hate me." Tyson then said, "After a while, I smoked some weed and drank some liquor, and I went to sleep."
Again, I think you can sort of see this sort of mindset Tyson was in. You know, smoked some weed to calm him down. I believe he even openly said he was still pretty much smoking weed throughout. Not that it enhances your ability, definitely does the opposite, and probably half the reason why Tyson wasn't as effective as he used to be. And, you know, you're going to smoke weed in your younger days, probably get away with it. As soon as you start hitting, sort of coming into your 30s, not so much. And this is the funny side of things. I mean, it wasn't funny. I mean, at the time, I remember thinking, I was just like, wow, this Tyson, I thought Tyson was mad and scary anyway. After this, I was like, this dude is like a whole nother level. He probably belongs just to, not in the ring. That's how I felt. I was only young. I was like, wow, this dude's scary. At the MGM Grand, people were basically fighting one another in the casino. Gambling tables were being knocked over, and people were actually grabbing chips as well. In the end, they had to close it down. So there was absolute carnage in the casino at the time. There was fights all over the gaff, and literally in the crowd as well. Now, the next day, Sports Illustrated headlined their cover with "Madman." President Clinton at the time said that he had been horrified with what happened in the ring. But jokes were made, plenty of them, on the Letterman and the Leno shows. Tyson was actually nominated for Sportsman of the Year. They also called it a good fight for Paper Chew. These are cracking ones here. Yeah, just for a couple of funny ones in there. And the press actually, you know, they got a bit serious with Tyson, so they called for a lifetime ban. And Tyson was being branded dirty, disgusting, repellent, vile, and cannibalistic. So, although you got the people joking, Paper Chew was a good one, and Sportsman of the Year, I thought they were the best ones. It was a bit mixed and match, really. I think at the time everyone was shocked by it, and then sort of people found the funny side of it.
Now, Tony Sewell, an English writer, published an article called "Why Iron Mike Was Right to Take an Earful." Great title, by the way. He wrote, "As the world rises in moral indignation and demands that Tyson be banned for going berserk, I smell a distinct waft of hypocrisy. Tyson was a gladiator who broke the rules. The real savages are the audience who now want to feed him to the lions." Now, Don King was worried about Tyson being banned for life, so he convinced Tyson to read a written statement by Sig Rioch, a public relations specialist, for the following Monday at the press conference, and this is what he said in that statement. "I snapped. Saturday night was the worst night of my professional career. I'm here today to apologise, to ask the people who expected more from Mike Tyson to forgive me for snapping in the ring and for doing something that I have never done before and will never do again. I thought I might lose because of the severity of the cut above my eye and I just snapped. I can only say that I am just 31 years old, in the prime of my career, and I have made it this far because I had no other way. I grew up in the streets. I fought my way out and I'll not go back again. I learned the hard way from the past because I didn't have the luxury of schools or people to help me at a time when I needed it the most. And I expect punishment and would pay the price like a man. I reached out to the medical professionals for help to tell me why I did what I did, and I will have that help now. I will attempt to train not just my body, but my mind too."
Great statement there from the public relations guy. Tyson even says himself he did. It was a script he read out. He didn't necessarily believe in what he was saying. The one thing he did say is that the attempt to train my body and not my mind was a great one, and one that he definitely took something from. So, you know, there was lessons learned. As I say, he's 31 years old, and he was a bit immature, Tyson, wasn't he, at 31? So, not saying that it was right for him to bite Holyfield's ear, but he was always on the edge, wasn't he, Tyson? Every time you watched him, he fought on the edge. So, I don't know, it's weird. It's because it's Mike Tyson, you give him leeway, don't you? It's crazy to say it, but you sort of do. It's not right, but you do. On July 9th, Tyson was actually called a discredit to boxing and fined 10% of his purse, which was $3 million, and then he was suspended, or they suspended him for at least a year. Now, Tyson said, I really felt betrayed after all the money I had made that city. Nobody else even approached the revenue I brought into Vegas, which he was right. He was earning them a shitload of money, but that's probably half the reason why they only suspended him for just the best part of a year and not for life. Because if Tyson wasn't Mike Tyson and it was just, I don't know, an average fighter, I'm telling you now, they would have probably been suspended for a good few years, if not indefinitely.
Well, they say that money talks and bullshit walks, and money certainly talks in Vegas. And we know from more recent times about certain fighters who have been accused of all sorts of things, and they've been able to fight after only, say, 6 months suspension. And to be able to then come back and make that much money, it's obvious. People want the money. The people in power want that money. And when you've got big superstars like Mike Tyson, who they know will make that kind of money, banning him for life is a mistake on their part, because they don't know when the next Mike Tyson or next superstar is going to come along. So this is exactly why they did that, because they knew he'd come back. They knew he'd come back to the ring. And I suppose it leads us nicely into the aftermath of the bite fight. And for Tyson's career, he did come back, of course, and he went on to defeat Francois Botha, Julius Francis, which was a crazy time in Manchester here when he came over to Manchester and absolutely destroyed Francis. Then he beat Lou Savarese. Then he talked about eating Lennox Lewis's children after beating Savarese in Scotland. Then he beat Brian Nielsen. Clifford Etienne had 2 no contests against Orlin Norris and Andrew Galotta, and then lost in a row 3 times in one of the biggest fights and another legendary night for us in the future, Lennox Lewis. Then he lost to Danny Williams, and finally he lost to Kevin McBride. And he finished his career with a record of 50 wins, 44 by way of knockout, and 60 defeats. He was inducted into the International Hall of Fame in 2011. But more recently, of course, as recently as 2 weeks ago, he actually came back in an exhibition and fought Roy Jones Jr. Now, I don't think we'll ever see him back in the ring as a professional, of course, but it's just crazy to think that even in 2020, Mike Tyson still was able to draw $10 million from that particular fight. And that just goes to show you, even in the infamous moments like the Holyfield fights, all them years ago, and yet that pulling power is still there because of infamous nights. As bad as this night was when he bit the ear of Holyfield, there's generations of boxing fans that know him for that. They might not know him for his career in the 80s. They might know him for biting Holyfield's ear off, but that was the end to an epic career for Mike Tyson. For Holyfield, of course, he decided to carry on, and rightly so. He fought on until 2011, picking up notable wins against Michael Moorer, John Ruiz, Hasim Rahman, Lou Savarese, Francois Botha, and Brian Nielsen, and he lost and drew with Lennox Lewis, another legendary night that we did for season 1, and John Ruiz as well, and then was defeated by James Toney, Chris Bird, Larry Donald, and finally Nikolai Valuev. Holyfield, for his career, he finished with a record of 44 wins, 29 by knockout, 10 losses and 2 draws, and he was inducted into the International Hall of Fame in 2017. Johnston, what an absolute amazing tale of 2 guys that were always meant for each other in the ring. They should have got it on earlier than what they did. Circumstances obviously changed that, but even so, it gave us 2 of the most greatest nights for different reasons in boxing.
It did, and I can't tell you. I mean, it was great to be around and know that in our lifetime we were able to witness Tyson Holyfield, and the first fight in particular was a really good fight. I enjoyed the first fight. It was interesting. It was just funny because obviously Holyfield went into that fight as the underdog, and then seeing him he sort of got better as the fight wore on, and Tyson wasn't happy with the situation, obviously, from the headbutt, which we've got into, and then obviously the infamous second fight, the bite fight. As you say, I remember it well, and I remember just being in shock, and then I was even more shocked that they let it carry on, and then obviously he goes and bites it again, and I sort of thought that Tyson's career at that point, even though he was only just 31 years of age, I thought that it was going to be hard for him to come back from that. But the funny thing is, again, when you read Tyson's book, he says that a lot of people were saying, if when they watched the fight, they were on his side. And they were saying, like, if a guy was headbutting me that much, I would have bit him in the ear. So it was getting mixed messages. I suppose it depended on who he was knocking around with and who he was talking to. But apparently he was getting good feedback at the fact that he bit his ear. It's crazy to say again. Holyfield, again, as you say, just accepted and he forgave him instantly. It's just a credit to Holyfield. I think if anything, it was a great towel. It is a fantastic towel, and it is one that I'm glad we finally got to do. It's just a shame we didn't get to see him fight in 1991. If we'd have seen that fight in 91, I think that'd have been very, very interesting and very close. I think it'd have been a lot closer than their first fight was. I may even have just shaded Tyson. I just think even though he'd lost to Buster Douglas, I think that Tyson would have caused Holyfield a world of trouble. But we'll never know. We'll never know.
That's the thing. That's the what if of the situation. We were never going to know that. And it's been great. A great episode. A great tale. Another fantastic addition to the Legendary Night series, which we thoroughly enjoyed doing, of course. Now, I just want to give a big shout out, of course, to all our patrons who have been supporting the podcast, as well as, of course, as our general listeners, but our patrons who have gone the extra mile by supporting the podcast by visiting patreon.com/BTR Boxing Podcast Network. A big shout out to Tyler Dyer, Rob Evans, Benjamin Waters, and our newest patron, Nick Canada. Thank you guys for supporting this podcast network. We really appreciate it. We hope you're enjoying it. If you are a listener and you've been thinking about becoming a patron for a while, please go and check out all the available tiers and the available benefits of becoming a patron. There's plenty of tiers, whether it be a minimal tier or if you want to go full all the way and provide us the ultimate support, please go and have a look at it. At least just take a couple of minutes out of your time to go and have a look. We genuinely appreciate all the support, no matter who it is, a patron or no patron. We absolutely love the lot of you because you are allowing us to continue doing series like this and giving us amazing feedback. Johnston, I'm just amazed and blown away by this level of support by these guys.
Oh, massively. I can't thank you all enough. And just please, we'll continue to try and produce the material for you guys to enjoy listening to and just continue to support us as much as possible. And if anyone else wants to jump on, then please do. It is a massive, massive support to us. And, we just want to keep doing this. We want to make it better. We want to spend more time in doing it. And for that to happen, we do need some sort of support. And we just can't thank you guys enough. Please keep doing it. And I'm blown away by it, Sean. It's fantastic that people are putting their hands in their pocket to listen to us. So massive, massive respect to you guys.
So, guys, follow us on social media at Legend Night Pod on Twitter and the BTR Boxing Podcast Network Facebook page. Check us out on there. If you've not already subscribed, you can do so by checking us out on Apple Podcasts. Please rate and review on there. You can check us out on any available podcasting app out on there as well. And we will also be starting to upload more of our back catalogue of episodes onto the YouTube channel. So if you are a YouTube user and you want to have it on your TV in the background while you're hoovering the floor for your missus, or you are the missus and you're cleaning the house for your husband, then certainly get us on YouTube on the telly. We're going to be releasing episodes every single Monday from the back catalogue of all the series that we run, so please check out the YouTube channel. Fight fans, you've been listening to the tale of Mike Tyson and Evander Holyfield.